It's a race against time. How quickly can Western countries cut their reliance on oil and gas from Russia? In the United States, North Dakota is the third largest oil producer. And here, the tensions playing out in the energy sector are on full display. Will the clock be turned back?
There is a greater voice for fossil fuels.
Or will green energy gain real momentum?
We call it the Saudi Arabia of wind.
What role does environmental protection play?
A lot of people have been taking for so many years.
For Cody Two Bears, going green isn't about high-stakes policy making, and it's certainly not about making money. He strives to lead a life in accordance with his cultural values. The Sioux lived in what is today North Dakota for centuries before the Europeans came to North America, robbing the native people of their lands and livelihoods. Cody Two Bears is the descendant of a Sioux chief. He took us to the Standing Rock Reservation. The 37-year-old grew up here in Cannonball.
In our language, we say nachi, nachi, spirit. Anything in this earth, this planet, this universe that has a spirit that grows, moves, water that flows, grass that grows, the animals, the four-legged, the winged ones. So when we try to protect the land, we try to protect the earth and water and all these elements, those in our culture are our relatives. Because we were taught that, we believe that we're all connected.
The increasing environmental destruction caused by the oil and gas industries and pipelines like this one propelled him to fundraise to build a solar farm on the Standing Rock Reservation. Against all odds, his dream of empowering his community by generating its own renewable energy became a reality when the farm went online in 2019. In its first 2 years, Cannonball managed to cut energy costs by $30,000, a hefty sum for one of the poorest areas in the United States.
When you're a part of a fossil fuel-driven state, a lot of times the policies within those states are all pro-oil, pro-coal. And it makes it that much more difficult to do these types of projects within a state that's created that way. Well, every time we do things like this, it takes that much away from having to rely on fossil fuels. Dying substance is what I say it. It's something that you get from the ground. If we can use the natural elements that we have, like the sun, the wind, different other elements around us that's more natural to our environment, that doesn't destruct the lands and contaminate our water, then we're making the world a better place to live.
But what do people whose livelihoods depend on oil think about all this? North Dakota is among the largest states in the US in terms of area. But despite being half the size of Germany, it's home to only about 800,000 people. We drove almost 400 kilometers to the town of Tioga in the northwestern part of the state, near the Canadian border. Here we met with Matthew Kraft, who works as a lease operator on an oil field.
Well, I'd be looking at the pressures on the wellhead, making sure the well is still working, checking the treater building back there, making sure that's pressured right, selling gas, not flaring. If it is flaring, what it is, checking our daily production.
Okay. How much is the production of this plant here?
This one's like about 20 barrels a day. Tioga is mainly an oil production area. If oil was gone, it'd be just a farming community, just like the rest of most small areas in North Dakota. So it's very vital for the identity right now.
North Dakota churns out more oil than Venezuela and is the third biggest oil producer in the US after Texas and New Mexico. Companies have been extracting oil here in large quantities since the 1950s. And an ever-increasing amount of oil and gas is now attained through fracking. The method is controversial because it involves using considerable amounts of toxic chemicals. Environmentalists fear these chemicals are contaminating groundwater. The town of Tioga proudly deems itself the oil capital of North Dakota and is home to just over 1,000 residents. But depending on the state of the oil market, the population can swell to 3,000 through seasonal workers, nearly all of whom are men. It's lunchtime at the Side Street Diner. Talking with locals helps us understand why many in North Dakota are struggling with the question of renewables.
Yeah, my entire family's from here. My grandpa worked, he had workover rigs, and I work in for a workover rig company. So, I mean, everybody in the family does. It's just the main industry around here, so.
Do they hope for better business now that Western countries are looking to cut their ties with Russian oil and gas?
For us, it's a normal thing. It's up and down all the time. Like, this has happened to us before. It'll skyrocket, get busy, and then it'll plummet back down. It's just a roller coaster. It's just how we live, I guess.
You know, it hurts when we can't sell local oil, honestly. And I don't think green energy is a bad thing, but I think just trying to abruptly change it, you know, is short-sighted.
The wind goes down, the windmills don't work. The cloud cover, your solar energy is not going to work. And when it's snowing and cold out, you got a problem, folks.
But is that true? What does it take to supply people with electricity when there are low winds? We drove 5 hours east to visit one of the state's largest wind parks. There, near Fargo, we met with Paul Jensen, an energy consultant and president of a company specializing in renewables.
We got a long way to go because we need to build our transmission network, distribution network, and to be able to accommodate the change away from fossil fuels to more renewable energies and more battery storage.
But Paul Jensen says energy can go completely green one day, and wind power will be crucial.
As you can probably feel today, we have a very high wind capacity factor here in this state. The wind blows continuously. We call it the Saudi Arabia of wind. The biggest challenge is to get the population educated in understanding the benefits of having renewable energy and the freedom that it gives you, because it's actually patriotic to be focusing on renewable energy because it means independence from so many different world powers.
Clint Jewett manages the Ashtabula wind farm. He walked us through the control center.
Each tile here is a wind turbine. All our ones that are colored are not running. They're being worked on right now at the moment. And this number here is how many kilowatts they're putting out.
How many windmills do you have here?
283 wind turbines. It depends on the year and the wind resource, anywhere from 45 to 60% capacity factor. So you're probably putting out 436 megawatts an hour, 45 to 60% of the year.
How many households can you kind of support with that per day, in average?
So it's right there in 70 to 80,000 homes. It could power the residential grid of Fargo.
It sounds like this wind farm has excellent prospects, but will that win over most people in the United States?
I think most Americans really do not have that luxury to think this over. They are fighting day to day to have food on the table. Some of them work 2 jobs, some even 3 jobs. And for a very large part of the country, that discussion is theoretical. They're just looking at what's going to cost me to put gas in my car or my pickup. And that's it, basically. Other than that, I don't think that they have the luxury of thinking too far strategically.
So far, state lawmakers haven't shown much interest in changing the status quo. North Dakota is traditionally a farming state, but many smaller farms are now struggling to survive in the fiercely competitive global market, something that's benefited Republicans at the polls. In the last presidential election, Donald Trump received 65% of the votes here. Merrill Peepcorn is a North Dakota state senator and one of the few representing the Democratic Party. He promotes expanding renewables.
in various states, the homeowner is encouraged to install solar panels. And here in North Dakota, I mean, there's nothing really to encourage people to not only install their solar panels, but roadblocks are put up for people putting up their own net metering systems. We're just not friendly, we're not open to it. And again, I think there might be a little bit of lack of knowledge, lack of education, but then the electric generating companies, the electric distribution companies, the co-ops pretty much lobby against it too. So it's very difficult.
It's not just the oil industry that's fighting against green energy. The local trade union, based in the state capital of Bismarck, hopes recent geopolitical events will help the industry boom.
Right now, with the war going on in the Ukraine, we're actually seeing an uptick on a push toward fossil fuel energy, not the green power, because it's so available and it's readily produced here in the state of North Dakota. There is a greater voice for fossil fuels, and the United States can produce what we need plus export more.
Given a choice between oil and gas or sun and wind, Cody Two Bears doesn't hesitate.
That find a new way that honors the old way of life in a good way that does protect what we say in our language, Uchimaka, Mother Earth. So important, because every single day we're affecting our mother. We're harming our mother. Our cultural ways and why science needs to understand and realize this is that being the original caretakers of this land, we know how to give back. A lot of people have been taking for so many years, but nobody's ever learned how to give back when they take. And Native Americans need to be brought to the table in this country so we can start to educate the Western world on why it's so important today to start giving back before it's too late.
In North Dakota, the question of the right energy is also a question of identity. But for Cody Two Bears, there's more at stake. It's about saving the planet.